This little beauty is called the Somavedic, and it's meant to protect the body from the effects of electrosmog, which is the combination of waves and fields that we're exposed to from modern technology. So that includes things like geopathic stress, EMF, free radicals, and it's meant to structure and energize water and harmonize your living space according to the marketing material. I am actually really excited to have one of these because I've seen them going around and I thought they look hella cool, and there's maybe something to it, but at the price point I couldn't justify taking the risk. But I wasn't satisfied with the online reviews, and as a doctor and curious cat, I had to go and test it out for myself. So I've been down so many rabbit holes for this video, so you better appreciate this, YouTube. I've peed on sticks, I've tested my heart rate, I've had this in and out of my room and wrapped things in foil and everything. And I'm going to cover the theory behind this device, the claims of the device, the human data, my results, and my recommendations. This is not a sponsored video. They have kindly sent me this one for free, but with no stipulation on what I should say. As you know from our channel, we don't blindly promote stuff, and there's actually some pretty scathing reviews of some products on the channel as well. So as you know, I'm not afraid to tell you how it is. I should also say that this is not a field of medicine that I'm familiar with. You know, this is more the territory of functional medicine stuff, and the mechanisms that I've described at the start, it's the first time I've really been exposed to them properly. No, my camera just turned off on a timer there, scuppered by home automation. Maybe that's why I need one of these. So what I was saying is, I'm not quick to say that this stuff is rubbish, because any new idea gets dismissed as quacky at first, and then it gets integrated into modern science and medicine. And actually, when I look into the processes and mechanisms that they talk about, there's definitely something going on, but it's just not that well documented in the science. And I've had to revert to documentation from the producer and my personal experience. I'm trying to apply some level of scientific rigor with doing this test, but it's not been that easy to do. And if this is your area, if you're a functional medicine expert or whatever, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. So if you want to skip the science and boring stuff and just want to see my results with it, skip to that chapter in the video. So let's begin with the theories and the claim of this. The main mechanisms that the Somavedic device claims to work is through mitigating the effect of EMF, electromagnetic frequencies, on the body, producing negative ions and structuring water, and as a result, harmonizing your environment within a 100-meter radius. So theoretically, my neighbors are getting their environment harmonized for free. So let's start with EMF. There are definitely electromagnetic fields that are produced by wiring and Wi-Fi and cellular devices and all that kind of stuff. And the data shows that it does interfere with our concentration, our sleep quality, causes headaches and allergy exacerbations, and generally causes oxidative stress to our cells. And you can see our other videos on this for more. The mechanism by which this occurs is most likely the disruption of catecholamines and stress hormones, so adrenaline, noradrenaline, dopamine, cortisol, and you can see here the effect of serum levels of catecholamines when exposed to different levels of EMF. So it basically acts as a chronic stressor. Now that part is pretty undisputed. I'm quite convinced that EMF stress is real. Some people are more sensitive to it than others, and you probably notice that if you go out for a couple of nights out in the country and you sleep like an absolute log, part of it is probably because you're away from a lot of these environmental disruptions. The hard part is obviously separating that from, is it just being in holiday mood? Is it having better food? Is it the lack of noise? Anyway, let's park that for a second. The next thing, negative ions. Now, I've seen mixed and unconvincing evidence in general about negative ions and the effects on human health. I know there's a suspicious salt lamp in the background, which I get a lot of hate for. I promise it's just for aesthetic. Dude has a salt lamp. He's not a doctor. Johnny says technically he doesn't have a salt lamp. The salt lamp has him. Conspiracy confirmed. I don't take advice from any medical professional who has a Himalayan salt lamp. Have I missed the memo on the salt lamps? The next thing is this claims to structure the water that's in its environment. Now, there is a grain of truth to the structured water thing, but the flagship study by Masaru Emoto wasn't reliably replicated. And it's the idea that you can impact the way that water is structured when you give it positive emotions and positive intentions and prayer and that kind of thing, and then you freeze it into water crystals, and the water that got hate or throwing shade at the water versus complementing the water produce different crystal shapes. The main criticism is that the samples are cherry-picked. Anyway, the claims of the device are improved sleep, more energy during the day, fewer headaches, particularly in women apparently, less brain fog, and feelings of calmness and peace. The reason I wanted to explore geopathic stress before going onto the device is obviously that with my doctor hat on, I need to know a mechanism of action before I can get personal buy-in. And sadly, it was very hard to find anything online in terms of how this works. And maybe it's because the guys at Somavedic don't want to share that for intellectual property reasons or whatever. But generally, what they say on their website is that it creates a coherent field of energy that mitigates the harmful effects of EMF and other environmental stresses on the body, plus structuring water, including your blood, to improve health and well-being. The product itself, and this is one of the models, there's several different versions, is a set of crystals and precious stones arranged in a pyramid structure in this glass dome, and some of the precious minerals are integrated into the glass itself. It's a set of proprietary minerals. I think it looks really nice. And there's a green lamp as well that you can probably see if I unplug that and plug it back in. Maybe not, a bit light here. But they say that also functions as an indicator that it's working. They very much believe in the product, and they've got a 60-day guarantee. They've got raving testimonials about it. So I was thinking there's no smoke without fire, and worst case, it's a nice lamp to have. So during the testing period, I had it on 24/7. My criticism is that overnight, I had to cover it up, I had to put it in a box because it's a green LED, which, as we know, not great for sleep. Some people get around this by putting it in another room or putting it in a cupboard or something, just something to consider. Anyway, what they say is that the device produces 2 million frequencies that constantly broadcast to scan the surroundings, people, and flora to try and eliminate blockages which impede the proper function of the organism. And that the stones are lined up in a pyramid arrangement at the core of the glass dome, and there's 2 copper plates used for earthing, serving as an antenna, and then also copper wires that work as frequency emitters to appropriate the radiation. Basically, the proposed mechanism of action is bioresonance therapy. Now, that's outside of my area as a medical doctor. The bioresonance therapy in general stimulates the self-healing powers of the body via meridians and so on. Again, like, I've never heard of that before. All I can say is that from looking at the data, something is happening, something's going on, and the body does have its own fields and electromagnetic frequencies, but I don't know if we are sophisticated enough to be able to manipulate them with technology. Now, to steelman that position, naturopathic or functional practitioners would say that Western medicine is the blunt force, and that this deals with the more subtle energies and allows the body to kind of heal itself, so we're not going to see dramatic effects overnight. And fundamentally, the science is a guide, it's a pointer, but what I need to know is, does this make me feel better when I'm using it? I've also not been able to find high quality evidence on bioresonance therapy. Please comment below if you find anything. Let's get onto the data that we do have. Now, common strategies to mitigate EMF are putting covers on your phones, or hardwiring everything, or using Ethernet cables, or rewiring your house. There's also the fact that if you live on a street with neighbours, then it's not really possible because everyone's got Wi-Fi routers and things. So you can't practically eliminate EMF coming in. Only if you are Ben Greenfield and you live in a wood hut with grounding mats and everything. The Somavedic claims to bypass that by not reducing EMF in the environment, but reducing the effect that it has on your body. In terms of testing, I wanted to measure as much as I could about myself that would give an indication about some of these effects of EMF. So we talked about catecholamines and maybe HRV, stress levels, mood levels, all that kind of thing. Now, EMF does not affect HRV directly. As you can see here, now that study is the only one I could find, and it was funded by Inaris, who have industry partner funding, so maybe take it with a pinch of salt. And this other study shows kind of mixed results. Generally not what I'd have expected, but all we can say is it's basically murky whether it affects HRV. Now this kind of doesn't matter, maybe I'm looking too hard into mechanisms, because supposedly the Somavedic does have a positive effect on HRV independent of EMF stuff. There's maybe some other mechanism. There's a few case studies from their literature where they took 10 people, made them sleep with a Somavedic, measured the effect on HRV, and they compared the effect with and without. So I've summarized this data into a table here, and it looks like 8 out of 10 people had some improvement. All the people said that they were sensitive to electrosmog, and that's something to bear in mind because I don't consider myself to be sensitive to that. I don't think I can tell the difference subjectively, but that's encouraging. There's something that we can measure. The other main feature of the bioresonance therapy is healing and regeneration. So they used fibroblast activity as a proxy to measure cell healing and cell regeneration. So they got one of these, they wrapped it in foil, and they tested basically cell activity with and without the Somavedic device. And they looked at the cell response, so reactive oxygen species with and without the Somavedic when exposed to EMF, and also fibroblast activity and cell migration, basically the response to cellular stress caused by mobile radiation. And it looks like, from this diagram, that the Somavedic device compensated some of the cellular stress that was induced by mobile radiation. Now, looking at this, that seems pretty convincing. It's outside of my area to be able to properly critique the methodology of the study, but the one thing that does jump out at me here is obviously there's overlapping confidence intervals with the different bars. So maybe they're a bit confident with the claims on this, but it certainly visually looks appealing. And it seems to have partly mitigated mobile phone exposure. The more distance that the cell travels, the more healing is taking place. There's a few other bits of data as well about ESR, so the erythrocyte sedimentation rate, very catchy name, and how that is affected by EMF as well, and I'll talk about that in a second. Then we have HRV, heart rate variability, and negative ions. So HRV-wise, Kuchera et al. Showed that the device improved heart rate variability, blood circulation, and autonomic nervous system balance. And then another study by the same guy showed that the green ultra device reduced oxidative stress and increased antioxidant capacity. Great. These are internal studies, but they're all pointing in the right direction. Finally, on the negative ions thing, someone did actually measure the negative ions with the Somavedic device in the room, and this is what she found.
Okay, enter the Somavedic. I'm going to plug it in, and we don't see any increase whatsoever from wireless because it doesn't have a wireless element, so you don't have to worry about that. A lot of people have asked me. Now let's look at the magnetic fields. Oh my goodness. Okay, we saw from the salt lamp readings of about 50, and now we're up. Wow, I just saw a peak over 180. So that's a lot of electric fields to be exposed to, especially if you have this on your nightstand in a living area. Oh my goodness, look at this. Okay, so clearly it's the cord that's the culprit, but even if we get back 2 feet away where we were with the salt lamp, yeah, so it's gone down. Let me point it though towards the device, and it's still over 28. Let's look at the negative ions. Any change in our negative ion reading? No. But those are really high levels of negative ions. And this is more typical of an indoor environment. And as you can see now, it's down to 1.30. Nothing has changed. But I think the highest that we saw was maybe 1.8, 1.7, way less than half, almost a third of what they show on the website. So the important part of this measurement is that Somavedic puts it in their science section and says that in addition to, quote unquote, mitigating the effects of EMF, which of course have not been proven, that they also generate negative ions, but I'm not seeing it here.
So again, I'm just laying the foundations here. Really, I'm more interested in how does the device affect me rather than what the data says, because in reality, the data could be outstanding, could be phenomenal, but what would you rather? Like good gains and bad data, or good data and bad gains? Science. So onto my results with this. Basically, I tried to measure as much as I could. I established a baseline, I then introduced the device, and then I withdrew it and then reintroduced it. So I was trying to see how I felt and what my numbers did when I was exposed to it, and then when I took it away and then had it back again. As I say, I really struggled to find enough data and make sense of the mechanisms and so on, but that's okay for me. Maybe it's just me being stupid, and subjectively, my own data is what we're looking to test here. So baseline-wise, I got HRV, sleep data, mood, and stress, and I was going to do an ESR as well, that blood test I mentioned, but actually the last ESR blood test I did last year was too low to begin with, and it wouldn't have been a particularly exciting result. It would be too low to have any kind of effect size. And I've not got access to a microscope or any kind of specialist tests. So I did away with blood tests this time. You might also be thinking, how do you hedge against placebo effect? I think placebo or not, for the subjective things, it doesn't really matter because it's how you feel. And we've got objective measures too. I also think we shouldn't be chasing numbers. Like, oh, what about placebo? Well, what about it? Like, would you rather still feel stressed, but you're nailing your HRV numbers, or would you actually rather just feel better? Like, that's what we're trying to influence. That's the real North Star. In terms of measuring EMF, baseline EMF-wise, we want to look at subjective, objective, and then the effect of the device. Subjectively, I don't think I'm a particularly sensitive person to EMF, so not a big factor for me. Objectively, I thought there was no point in buying an EMF device and testing my house because we know where the sources are. It's things that are plugged in and your Wi-Fi router and that kind of thing. So it's not going to tell me anything new. And the only way to really eliminate it is turning them off. I also didn't test the EMF of the device itself because it's an electrical device. It's going to produce EMF, and that's kind of expected. The team at Somavedic say that it doesn't block EMF from other devices. It's instead dealing with your body's capacity to handle it. So all of that's to say there's not really much point in measuring EMF at this point. Heart rate variability, however, is a good proxy for stress, and so I tracked that along with sleep, free radical urine test strips, and subjective measures as well. So here's how I did it. I used the circle ring, which is this, if it'll focus. This is a medical device used to track blood pressure, heart rate variability, sleep quality, rest rate, oxygen saturation, a whole bunch of stuff. Really cool to have it in that small device. And then more recently I've been sent this as well, which is the ultra-human ring. It's not quite as accurate from a medical standpoint, but it's less cumbersome and more comfortable to wear when sleeping. I tried to integrate as much data as I could into Apple Health, and then to get a truly accurate morning HRV measure, I used the Polar Strap, which you wear around your chest. One of the only ways to really get a proper HRV measure is direct contact with your chest, but both waking and sleeping measures are useful. I just wanted to get as much data as I could. I also used free radical test strips as a way to measure oxidative stress. Good morning. It's that time again for me to wee on a stick. So this is before I introduced the Somavedic into my life, and this is a urine free radical test. Now, I did sleep terribly last night, so I'm concerned that's going to affect the result. Luckily, the guys have sent me a few of these, so I'm going to take some serial measures over the next few days to try and normalize the result. So I will see you in a second. Okay, here's the result after 3 minutes. I'd say that's bang on erhot. It's not quite hoch or sehr hoch. And subjective measures of stress and mood using Exist, which is a really great tool that basically pulls together all of your data from as many wearables and things as possible and gives you correlations based on what you've been tracking, which is really cool. So the dates, this arrived on the 22nd of February. I gave it to my girlfriend so that it was away from me and collected a baseline measure. I then started using it on the 8th of April and then turned it off on the 25th of April, went to the USA, returned, reintroduced it. So I've got some data of using with and without. Here are the heart rate variability results. So we've got baseline and then started using it 8th of April, turned it off on the 25th, noticed that I didn't have any super high readings after that. And then I came back from the US on the 1st of June, reintroduced it, and you can see it kind of recovering. Now, yes, it's a blunt analysis and a trip to the US is a bit of a shock to the system anyway, jet lag and so on. Now, I can't export the data, sadly, from this app called Elite HRV, and I didn't want to delay this video anymore by trying to wrangle with the data. So most people on YouTube don't really care about this stuff. So if you want something that's more in depth, just let me know and I could run the numbers on the written version of this video on our website, and I'll put the link in the description. Sadly, the Exist dashboard doesn't have an endpoint for HRV, so I could only track my heart rate in terms of correlations, but there was no significant correlation with Somavedic and heart rate. Other correlations that you can see here are interesting. Obviously you can see some of these are a bit spurious, but pretty cool that you can see these as an output. And then here's a visual of those correlations. I didn't see a huge difference in the urine free radical strips either, but my baseline was already pretty low. So there's my data. No massive fireworks, but generally positive trends, and I'll leave it up to you to interpret that. I wasn't someone who was initially sensitive to EMF anyway. There was loads of variables going on. It's really hard to do a proper test when you're living a normal life, and I didn't do a proper statistical analysis. In general, I still really like this device. I think it looks really cool as well. I'm going to start putting it in the background of videos as well. And if it's something you're interested in, they have that guarantee, so you can always try it and see if it works for you. I should say as well, if you are someone that's concerned about EMF in general, you should probably turn off your Wi-Fi router at night and try some of the other mitigation strategies too. Anyway, I'm happy to answer your questions below. Can't guarantee I'll know the answer, But here's some further reading to take a look at. So there's a skeptical breakdown of the Somavedic device on this link, and also have a look at some of the literature and the science that they have on their own website. Finally, if you want a good mental framework for assessing biohacking devices and identifying scams and things, have a look at this video.